But don't worry.
Well,
And that's.
we were trying to figure out what this person and I've had a lot
I took
the man with medical way.
Talking about Tom, not you.
Trust me.
Wherever you want to.
I said that.
We have to come in.
Need me approved? As the old expression goes, sometimes you get the bear, sometimes the bear gets you.
Doing okay?
I'm dying, excuse me, right there.
That's fine. I'm Linda Martin. I had a chance to.
So nice to meet
So
you.
I just got in from the.
I heard as much. Well, I know your counterpart in Knoxville quite well. I'm very fond.
Well, I looked at.
He's pretty extraordinary. Yeah, I can imagine. Wonderful. Pleased with what you've done. Fantastic. It's amazing.
If we had, I should say, rain in the fall. Well, one of the things.
How are you?
Yes, so we're just.
So nice to meet you.
Thanks, so this time
It's nice to meet you. Well, you'll have to take that decision after you speak.
So I was complaining to
I don't blame you.
see, I don't know how to job.
There you go. Well, so nice. That's great. I love it. That's wonderful. So when I was making, I had to meet, I had written using my notes to just be purely around. That would kill you. I'm a sexually.
All yours, everybody's good. All yours good.
So one of the great features of people in my business is I read it. One of the real problems I would say with young people in community service districts, is young people don't talk about it. I bet it was started. I bet it was.
I'll see if I can decide.
Probably the toughest thing in our business is
We ready to start? It's your call. Okay. Well, welcome everybody to our inaugural Spear Distinguished Entrepreneur Series. We are so pleased to have you here today. I see faculty, I see students, I see high-level administrators, and members of the community. And we're hoping to make this series a regular event 3 times a year where we have the privilege of meeting and listening to someone who has really distinguished themselves in the business world. Right now, I'd like to introduce our Chancellor, Dr. Lynn Martin, who's going to say a few words of welcome, and then I'm going to introduce Brenda Spear, who is the benefactor of this series, and she will introduce our guest, Mr. Dr. Denbo.
Good evening, welcome. We're glad to have you here. This is an exciting opportunity, and I'm so glad that so many members of the community are here this evening. When we did our strategic plan at UT Southern, we talked about people, purpose, and partnerships. People meaning growing the enrollment, providing additional opportunities for our students. Purpose meaning creating meaningful educational experiences. And then partnerships, how do we work together with the community, with alumni? How do we build those bridges and how do we bring that richness to our campus? And I think the event this evening checks all 3 boxes. And I'm really thrilled to be able to kick this off and introduce Brenda Spear. She's going to tell you a little bit about the series and explain how it got started. But I just want to say thank you for being here. It's going to be an exciting evening. And thank you, Brenda, for making all of this happen. Please help me say thanks.
Thank you all for coming tonight. I see a lot of friends and family and people I've known all my life and this great community that we have in this wonderful university. And how this series came about, it started several years ago, and we're finally here tonight, which is so exciting. And I've got to say, of all the time we thought about speakers and how we were going to do it, and Sherry and Prentice said, let's just get it done. And I said, I want our first speaker to be Don Denbo. And I really didn't even know all the things that he had accomplished. I was like, oh my gosh, I was just like shocked. But now that I hear him and I see his stories, and we're so fortunate to have him here. And his wife Jackie, thank you all for coming down tonight. And she's beautiful and spending the time to come with him. And what I was just love about Don is that Don is not new to Pulaski. Don, we're claiming Don, he is from Pulaski. Now, Nashville might claim him and Franklin might claim him, but he's from here. Would you all agree? He is from here. And he was raised right here in Pulaski, and he's just done so many things. I'm gonna have to read all this because I couldn't possibly remember all this, but he is a co-founder of the Commercial Insurance Associates, one of the nation's leading property and casualty firms, and he's still working. Beyond his business success, which impressed me so much about Don, is when I read in the UT alumni the things that we get. Don is a humanitarian, and he funded the humanities school at UT. So that's what that tells me is what a kind heart to give back. And that's really huge to me. I can remember as a kid, it would be so big that we would go to UT football games and we'd be going, oh my gosh, we get to see Donnie Denbo play football. It was really a big thing, I'm not kidding. They had a record of 28-5-1. They won an SEC championship, a Sugar Bowl. You know, it just goes on and on. He also has a PhD in economics from the London School of Economics. He's been published in the New Yorker for his poetry. He, in 1924, made a generous contribution, like I said, to the UT, and he's dear to our heart. That was 2024. You know, what he offers us is he represents the idea of the Spirit Distinguished Entrepreneur Series. And you all may all remember my late husband, Dan Spear. And Dan was such a huge supporter of education and community and connecting people. And that's one of the reasons why we wanted to start this series. And so with that, I'm going to let Don tell you the rest, because he's a great storyteller. I want to welcome you, Don. Thank you so much for being here at UT Southern, and we can't wait to hear your talk.
Usually I don't need a microphone. First of all, I'm delighted, flattered to be here. And I thought that maybe the first thing I might say is, how did I get here? And Brenda's right. I mean, I spent my formative years all in Pulaski. And I would say that I still have a tremendous connection here. We've owned businesses in Pulaski, and frankly, we just sold the last asset we had down here a couple of weeks ago. But here's how this sort of comes together. Brenda and I, who had seen each other in ages, ran into each other this past fall at the Alabama-Tennessee game in the press box, and we got a chance to catch up a little bit. And I have to say, the Denbo family and the Spear family had connections going back long before I was born. Dan Spear, her former husband, and I were in Boy Scouts together, and we met in the basement of the old rec center, which is over by where the original city pool was, which was a pre-Civil War building, and we all wondered if we went down there every week if we were going to get out alive, since I met it. Brenda talks about my generous spirit and that sort of thing, but my great passion for education in most of my adult life has really been in the value of a liberal arts education and how it teaches one to think. And I've been making this speech for a while, and basically what I'll remind you, everybody talks about STEM or STEAM, but I have to tell you that 3 or 4, depending how you're counting, of the items and the letters in STEAM are in the College of Arts and Sciences, so I have a deep personal commitment to that. And the gift that Jackie and I gave the University of Tennessee in Knoxville is called the Denbo Center for the Humanities and the Arts. And this is something that's very important to me. And I initially thought that I was going to give this speech about the value of a liberal arts education, and I certainly could, as I've done it many times. But then I read the press release, and it talked about entrepreneurism. And I thought it would be better, Brenda again used the word generosity and the different things that were said about me in there, and aside from wondering who the heck they were talking about, I thought I might, instead of making that speech, I thought I might tell you a little bit about the history of Pulaski and the 4 generations of the Denbo family that are here. And I think this will give you some sense of what is there. I laughed in one of the press releases that I saw about myself recently. They described me as a philanthropist. And it brought to mind one of my favorite scenes in one of my favorite movies of all time, and that's The Wizard of Oz. And towards the end of the movie, where the 4 protagonists are being rewarded with courage, brains, or heart, the wizard is giving the Tin Man a heart, red heart. And he says, back where I come from in Kansas, there are these people that do nothing but good deeds all day. They're called good deed doers. I don't think I've quite made it to the level of philanthropist, but I'm trying to be a good deed doer. At any rate, I want to talk to you about the 4 generations of Denbo and Pulaski. So the first generation is my grandfather, Denbo. He came to the United States in about 1903. His brother had come before him in 1888. They were from a part of Russia that is today known as Latvia. And he originally came to Athens, Alabama, of all strange places. I've never quite figured that one out, but that's where they came nonetheless. And he and his best friend started a business before the First World War in Huntsville, Alabama. My grandfather was drafted in 1917 and went off to the war. He had a feeling that he wasn't going to come back. I'm standing here as living proof that he did. And when he got back, his friend who he'd sold the business to was there already established in Huntsville, and he didn't want to compete with his friend. And so he looked to the next market town. Pulaski, as a county seat, was a market town. And southern towns in those days had markets. One of my favorite stories about Pulaski is every Thursday afternoon, the stores closed after noon. And it varied from town to town. Somebody mentioned Winchester a moment ago. Winchester closed on Wednesday afternoon. I happened to spend some time there. At any rate, my grandfather, Ike, took his mustering out pay, which was $500, I'm told, came to Pulaski because it was the next market town, and plunked his $500 down and started the business. Most people don't realize that in the early part of the 20th century, how poor the South was. Really nobody had any money. Reconstruction had ended in the 1870s or 1880s, and there really had not been any development here at all. People talk about business going overseas. Well, the first thing that happened is after the Second World War, business that had historically been in New England, cut and sew and shoes, moved all to the South. So there was a shirt factory here in Pulaski when I was growing up. There was a General Shoe, Genesco factory over near where the new high school is. And these all came from, the companies all came from the north. So when my grandfather started here, the family's known today as having been in the scrap metal business for almost 110 years. There was no industry. There was no way to make any money. So they did whatever they needed to do. They sold hides, cotton, chickens, eggs. My grandfather on my mother's side was a traveling salesman, and he traveled through southern Middle Tennessee and northern Alabama, and he would stop on his way back to Nashville and pick up eggs from my grandfather. And after the Second World War, the 2 grandparents decided to introduce their children, and I'm the result. At any rate, so that's how things happen until the end of the Second World War. My father, Charles Denbo, Denbo's son, grew up here in Pulaski, just over the hill here where there's really nothing much done. That's where the old Giles County High School was, and it was the Giles County Junior High School when I was in school here. And that's where my father went to school. The Giles County Bobcats in those days were known as the Giles County Golden Tornadoes. And I have a photograph at home, Sam, you'll get a chuckle out of this, you may have seen it, in which my father and both Clayton and Lee are in the picture. And they're wearing football uniforms, and I'm not sure you can identify them today as being football uniforms, but that's what it was nonetheless. So my father gets through with the Second World War, and he had gone off in the fall of 1940 to the University of Alabama to play football. I don't really know if he played, excuse me, the fall of 1941, I don't really know if he played as a freshman. Freshmen were eligible in those days. It never occurred to me to ask him. But I was raised an Alabama fan instead of a Tennessee fan. At any rate, he was shot down over Czechoslovakia, pretty badly damaged, and spent a year in a German prisoner of war camp. And he came back and couldn't play football after being injured, but GI Bill, he went back to the University of Alabama and he played in the $1 Million Band. So he was also a musician. Anyway, he comes back here in 1946 or 47 and goes to work in the business. My uncle Ted Lippman and Larry and Betty Lippman, my cousins, are sitting over there who still live here in Pulaski. Their father had also mustered out of the war. And he had gone to Vanderbilt University where he met my Aunt Dee, Larry's mother. And they got married, and they were living in Tullahoma. And Daddy said to his father, we need to get them over here in the business. And so the partnership between Ted Lippman and my father started. Ted, as I recall, came in 1949. Is that about right? I think that's right. 49 or 50. So Daddy had been here for a couple of years. At any rate, the business was originally started, as I said, selling hides and eggs and what have you. This Denbo Wholesale Produce, it was a sole proprietorship. In 1968, my grandfather, Denbo, decided to retire. They converted the business from being a sole proprietorship or a partnership into a C corporation. And my grandfather gave all of his shares in 1968 to all of the grandchildren, which included Larry and my sisters and Larry's sister. And I would say that was my first real opportunity to be involved in a business. Nonetheless, even before that happened, we all worked in some capacity or the other in the scrap metal business. And like everybody else, I worked in the metals warehouse trying to tell the difference between copper and red brass. And the old guys would rub it and claim that they could smell it. It's not true. They were just playing with an amateur. And the only way you can tell that I know about it is put both of them on the grinding wheel. One of them sparks and the other doesn't. And that's about the story. So anyway, I was there. And one of the things that I thought about, a statement that I'm going to make, as I contemplated this presentation and this speech, is that entrepreneurship is either taught or learned. It can be taught. I would suggest that it might be more easily learned. So we had a large extended family who got together on holidays. And when the meal was done, pretty sexist time, the men went one way, the women went another. The boys went with the men, the women went with the girls, and the girls went with the women. Well, what did the men all talk about? They were all in the scrap metal business. They talked about business. We got to sit there and listen to them. And the expression that I've used over the years about this is that I basically got a business education, which I described right along with mother's milk. It's fascinating that we own a business in the South, in Pulaski, Tennessee. And I've commented about this a moment ago, and that is how poor the South was. There was no industry here, none whatsoever. A little bit came during the Second World War, but mostly it wasn't here. And so the South was still largely agrarian. Giles County, some of you who live here, or maybe been here long enough to know, used to be called the land of milk and honey. And Pulaski, Giles County were very productive farmland. And that was part of it. Somehow or other, because we owned our own business in a small town in the South, I reached the conclusion that we were well-to-do. Nothing could have been farther from the truth. We were middle class, and I would say barely at that. And so I might have described us as the tallest midget in the room. So, in 1973, my father and my uncle bet hat, ass, and overcoat on new technology called an automobile shredder. And they borrowed $400,000 to put in, and maybe that was all there was. There weren't no more. If it didn't work, there was just going to be no more of us. It turns out that in 1972 or 73, Richard Nixon, as president, has to deal with an outbreak of inflation, somewhat like we've just been through, and he decided to put wage and price controls on everything in the United States economy, and he left one thing out: scrap steel. And basically, we went from being barely middle class to, honestly, well-to-do, maybe even a little bit more than that, in literally 2 years. My father went from driving a steak truck. My mother made him buy a 98 Oldsmobile. They hadn't made Oldsmobiles in a long time, which was sort of a poor man's Cadillac. But he had his grandfather's car, which was an 88 Olds, and he drove that every day, not our big car, because he could keep his fishing poles in the back of it and go fishing after work every day out by the industrial park. So when they basically succeed, I was already in already out of graduate school. I think I may have mentioned I went to Vanderbilt Medical School, studied under a Nobel laureate in London. I worked for a Nobel laureate at Vanderbilt University. His name was Earl Sutherland. And if you go to the September edition of the New England Journal of Medicine, in the footnotes of the article that we wrote on beta blockers, you can see my name in tiny print. It says lab assistant, which was barely true. So after I came back to Nashville, I really was unemployable. I was probably intolerable, even more so than today. And so I had the great good fortune of being asked to join First American National Bank, today's Regions, by one of our very dear friends, Kirby Prim, who was my first business mentor. And it was a great place to learn business. But meanwhile, I was a shareholder of Denbo Scrap Material in those days, and attended board meetings and continued to learn about business and that sort of thing. In 1976, I was calling on the company that today is Willis. It wasn't called that in those days. Willis is the third largest insurance intermediary in the world today. And I went out there to call on them for banking business, and I met a guy by the name of Bob Elliott. Those of you who are from Lawrence County know that there's an Elliott Insurance over there, which Bob founded after we parted ways. Good guy, dear friend. And Bob had played baseball at Tennessee in the 1950s, and he knew of me by football and academic reputation, and he Pac-Maned me, to be frank, and he got me into the insurance business. And I'll never forget that I had to bargain like crazy to get a raise from the banking business. And the first year that I was in the insurance business, it started February 2nd of 1976, I had a salary of $19,600, plus I got a bonus if I earned it. The first year that Jackie and I married, which was 1974, we both worked at banks. She was Third National. I was at First American. I still have our 1040 form. Collectively, between the two of us, we made $14,400. So we didn't have anything. We thought we did, but we didn't. Anyway, I got really lucky. I got really lucky. I found a business that I adore, I was perfectly suited for, and I started making a little money. We were able to buy our house, which is the only house we've ever owned, in 1976, which is, a lot of you know, is the founding footpath to the American dream. And I started making a little money, and I started investing a little bit in real estate and stocks. My father and I had been buying stocks together. The very first stock that we ever owned together was a company called Baker Oil Tool, which today is called Baker Hughes. It's the you may not know this, it's named after Howard Hughes' father. And Howard Hughes' father invented the rotary drill bit, which is still used in drilling oil wells today. It was the real source of Howard's money. If you've seen the movie The Aviator, you'll see this. So I can very much remember when I was assistant manager of the First American National Bank at Harding Mall, which doesn't exist any longer. I can remember the first day, I think in 1973, that the Dow hit 1,000. Here we are 40 odd years later, and the Dow is trading around 43,000. So if you'd have bought a Dow index stock in 1973, you'd have made 40 times your money. I didn't because I sold it. So anyway, by the time I'm having a little bit of success, President Carter was elected, and while he was an honorable man, very fine man, he was a terrible president in my view. And I thought he did a lot of damage to the United States, and I was afraid for what was going to happen. So I was looking for a hidey hole. We'd been scuba diving in Grand Cayman for a while, and my partner and I actually went down there scuba diving, bought a condominium because we wanted to be away from the United States somewhere, in a place where there are laws. In those days, Cayman was a British Crown colony. Today it's an independent member of the Commonwealth with its own legislative branch. And we went down there and bought a condo. Well, the people who were building the condos started building a hotel right next door, and the guy went broke right in the middle of it. My partner's name was Randy Davis, and just passed away last August, sadly. He said to me one day, "Don, we ought to buy that hotel and finish it." And I somehow or other came up with the thought that, you know, Randy, that's a good idea. and so we did. And we built that hotel, from which I learned the secret of how to make a small fortune, which is to start with a large fortune and build a hotel in the Caribbean. At any rate, I spent a lot of time in Cayman, built some more stuff, built another hotel we made money on, built some condos, made money on that. I lost in 1996 dollars on this project. In those days, $4.5 million. In today's money, I was age 43, today it'd be $12 to $15 million, I don't know exactly. But I had an interesting thought to myself, because I had been burned pretty bad first time out of the bag, and frankly, it's amazing that Jackie and I survived. It was a very tough time. But I promised myself at that point in time that I was not going to become risk averse. So many people who get whacked as hard as I did just basically pull the covering over their head and say, I'm done. I made a promise to myself that I wouldn't. So one day in 1985, a friend of mine introduces me to a guy who suggested to me, in these days I was in my venture capital days, is what at least other people thought. Whether it's true or not, time will tell. And he said, you know, you ought to get in the railroad business. I said, you gotta be kidding me. Because railroads were a mess. And I said, however, if the railroad that runs in Pulaski is going to be sold or abandoned, I think we have to take notice of it, because the family scrap business in those days, the only way we could deliver our product was by rail. You couldn't deliver by truck in those days. So sure enough, CSX, which was the owner at the time, had already made a deal to sell the railroad. And we ended up finding a guy by the name of Dick Abernathy, who's long passed, from Shelbyville. He had a history with the Illinois Central Railroad, and he'd already made a deal with CSX to buy it. And it was one of those matches made in heaven. He had the know-how and the connections. We had the capital. And so we agreed to buy what is today the Tennessee Southern Railroad. Still runs through Pulaski. CSX, and we agreed to buy it, to take it down from available cash. I think the number in those days was $1,300,000, and include the right-of-way and I think 6 or 8 locomotives and a bunch of other stuff. Anyway, so we're in the railroad business all of a sudden. Except CSX calls us before we can close on it. He said, well, you know, we got a problem with this railroad in Georgia. You gotta buy it first before you can buy the something. Well, we had never seen it before. So we went down and high-railed it. We bought the Georgia Northeastern, we bought the Tennessee Southern. In my life today, I have owned 24 short line railroads. You know what? It's interesting. I am deeply involved in the railroad business still as one of the largest shareholders in CSX. It's just one of those things that happen. As I was joking with Larry over there, I said, sometimes you get the bear and sometimes the bear get you. This time it looks like I did. It's been a source of incredible fun and also money. But the insurance business is really where all of the money that I've had the opportunity to invest came from. And I've got two stories about the insurance business with me that are sort of interesting, and I guess I'm known by them in our industry. The first one is, for a number of years, I was the insurance agent and the consultant for, and ultimately a board member for a company called Feld Entertainment. Well, nobody knows that. Feld Entertainment's still around, but the company they knew it by in those days was Ringling Brothers and Barnum and Bailey Circus. By the way, Feld was also, and still remains, the largest licensee of Disney. All the Disney on Ice shows are theirs. All the live Marvel shows are theirs. And monster trucks are theirs. And so I got to do that for a number of years, 22 years, which was just fantastic. But again, for me, everything really started and stopped with the insurance. So Commercial Insurance Associates is my third gig in the insurance business. We started it in 2002 with a bunch of people that I've worked with at Willis and subsequent companies, or predecessor companies, excuse me. And the last measurement that came out, we were the 63rd largest insurance agent in the United States out of about 33,000. And it's something I'm pleased with. It's something that's hard to believe. So, first generation of entrepreneur, Ike Denbo. Second generation of entrepreneur, Charles Denbo, Ted Littman. Third generation of entrepreneur, yours truly. I've got a saying about the word entrepreneur. It's a title that's better given than taken. You don't want to claim to anybody that you're not an entrepreneur, but you're pretty happy when somebody says, you know, he's an entrepreneur, or whatever that means. Maybe. So Jackie and I have 3 children. 2 boys on the end. Scott's the oldest, will be 47 in June. Sarah will be 44 in, 44, no wait. 44 in July. Will was 41 in February. I had no expectation that any of these people would really come into the insurance business. In fact, I thought maybe Sarah, our daughter, who's quite bright and powerful herself, was my best chance. She lives in Birmingham, has 2 wonderful boys, and she's a mom. And it's interesting, Will Denbo, youngest, was raised to be the 4th generation in the scrap metal business. He went to the University of Southern California, and at the start of the senior year, he picked up the phone and called me and said, Dad, I've changed my mind. I don't want to go into the scrap business. I said, huh? He said, I've decided I don't want to live in Decatur, Alabama or work for Joel Denbo. And knowing both Decatur, Alabama and Joel Denbo, I understood. At any rate, Scott had gone to Princeton University, had won a couple of national champions in the Shotput family event, and decided to move to California to try and make the 2004 Olympics. And in the interim, he had gotten married, and I had agreed to support him through the trials or the Olympics, whichever came first. He also got a job at a bond shop out there. And unfortunately, he didn't make it. And ultimately, he decided to come in the insurance business in 2004. So he did. So when Will makes this announcement to me, I said, well, what do you want to do, son? He said, well, you've done pretty well in the insurance business. I'd like to give that a try. And so I said to him, well, okay, sounds like a good idea to me. How about if we send you to London, which is really still the insurance center of the world, And we sent Will off to, actually, I should say, I took him off to London. I was involved with a brokerage over there for a long time, dear friends. And got there, found my apartment, opened him a bank account in 3 days and said adios. And it wasn't so good for him the first few days, but I said, son, too bad. Anyway, got home, I guess it was in the summer of 2008, and I picked him up at the airport and moved him back into his old room in our house. It's the room that he'd grown up in. And I told him, son, you got 30 days. You got to be out of here in 30 days. You got to have a job. And so he did, and he came to work with us. In about 24 months ago, this company that I've grown, which frankly, as much as the scrap metal business, I see as my legacy. I really do. It's been a wonderful experience with a lot of wonderful people in an industry that I adore. And I turned the business over to Scott and Will. This is the fourth generation of entrepreneurs. And I knew from the very beginning, and I told them this really before they really started working together, that they have different skill sets and different personalities. It's Mr. Inside and Mr. Outside. Scott is administration, finance, Will is revenues. Now, when I stepped back, I told them, I said, boys, one of you can be president, one of you can be CEO. And I don't care what you decide to call yourselves, except late for dinner, other than you both got to agree to it. So they decided that Scott was going to be the CEO, and Will was going to be president and revenues, and it's been a match made in heaven. So we've grown all these years. Scott's now been with the business for almost 19 years. Will's been with the business for, 14 years. And it's been remarkable to see how they've grown. But I want to revert back to the story about how I learned to be a businessman, entrepreneur, if you so will. The experience that I had as a child was exactly the same experience that they had as children. What did we do at family gatherings? We talked about business. Somehow or other they picked it up. They went to school. Scott learned about finance, the bond business. Will learned about administration with a degree in public policy and development, which is a great program in SC. And when they came back with a little bit of trial and error, they were ready to take over this company. And I'm happy to tell you, at least I believe, that they're regarded as two of the most outstanding young, comparatively young, at least by comparison to me, young insurance people in the business. The next question is, what's next? So Scott, older son, has a 17-year-old, a 16-year-old, and a 1-year-old. Sarah has twin boys, one named Jackson, one named William. They're quite remarkable, naturally. and Will has two girls, one 7 and one 4. I really think they're getting the same dose that we got. Because what do we talk about when we get together at Christmas? We talk about business. We talk about the insurance business. They all say to us, oh, Dad, shut up. Oh, Scott, shut up. We go to dinner. What do we talk about? All the women get down at one end. Our son-in-law, Bob, who's a lawyer and a smart businessman himself in Birmingham, sits with us. What do we talk about? Business. So they were ready to take these positions, which, by the way, I didn't give them, they earned. And so it's back to the whole issue that I really wanted to tell you. I've told you the story in a very, very shallow way about 4 generations of people that bear my last name and how this marvelous country enabled us to achieve things that, if you consider that my grandfather, when he came here in 1903, was a penniless Russian immigrant who never spoke English very well, but as I tell people, we could add a column of figures, achieved in 100 years, a little bit more than 100 years, 120 years. It's not possible. you look at it and you say, can't do it. But we did. How? I have no idea, other than for myself, and I was telling this to some of your administrators here, for myself, at 75 years old, I am driven by this insatiable curiosity about everything, and I am driven every day to learn something new. And the insurance business for me has been that opportunity. I very seldom go through a day that I don't learn something new. It's fantastic. It's wonderful. So I'm 75 years old, and I'll give you one of my favorite stories. There are very few truly original thoughts in the world. And I tell people that when somebody lays claim to an original thought, you better reach for your wallet. And so I will give you my possible, don't reach for your wallet just yet, you'll have to hear, original thought. And so this is my definition of retirement. It is doing about what you want, about when you want to do it. None of us can do exactly what we want, or exactly when we want to do it, whether we're working or not. And on that basis of doing about what I want, about when I do it, when I want to do it, I've been retired for at least 20 years. And I intend to be retired tomorrow, just like I'm retired today. And with that, all I can say is thank you very much for listening to my story. And I think I'm supposed to take some questions. Is that correct? Okay. I guess I should stand here. I think what I'm going to do is that we have two microphones. I'm going to sit back down over here. I think it's a little more appealing. And also better on my knees, which are both been plunged. You can thank football and rugby for that. Am I? Yeah.
That works.
Don,
Yes.
Larry, would you care to elaborate on the link between the scrap industry and your insurance business and the products that you offered and succeeded in developing for our industry?
I'll be happy to. So it's only natural that when I started in the business, and by the way, I didn't know anything about it, I hardly even knew it existed, that I would do the family's business. I did. But what I found was that there was a lot of need for people in the waste recycling business for insurance. Nobody knew very much about it at that point in time. I had a nice little practice, and it wasn't very large, but it was certainly lucrative in selling insurance to people in this space. And I was doing just fine with it. Will comes on in 2008, I guess it is, or 8. And after being there for just a little while, he says, because remember, he was supposed to be the fourth generation in the business. And he said, Dad, what are you doing? We've got this wonderful knowledge that, why are we going out and making something of it? I said, well, I don't know. Life's good. He said, well, let's do it. So we created this business plan to go all over the country calling on people in the waste and recycling business and the scrap metal business, which is part of that. And the business model was predicated, Nashville was a Southwest hub, low-cost airline. The business model was predicated on where does Southwest fly nonstop, because we could buy cheap tickets. If you'll forget a moment of braggadocio, today we fly private. So it's been pretty good times here. So today, we've been very successful at this. We have about 350 clients nationwide and worldwide in a business where there's, as I said, 33,000 insurance agencies. There are a number of 5 or 6 people who go by their brand. We really don't have a brand. Commercial Insurance Associates is not valuable. Marsh McLennan is valuable. Aon is valuable. CIA is not valuable. But within the waste and recycling space, we're the 800-pound gorilla. And we've been able to establish a brand, and that may be something that you'll learn in business school, the value of brands. I think you should, it's very important. And so we have become the go-to source for people all over certainly the North American continent, but also to a degree in Europe and Asia. And we've now, the whole firm's got about 150 people, of which 50 people work within this waste and recycling space. And we're hiring and training as fast as we can. So and by the way, maybe I got it started, but it's Will's idea, and Will has pulled it off, and I'm very proud of him for that. Other questions?
I have one. I would like to know, because one of our goals here is to offer our business students or anyone that's interested in your industry internships. Do you all take interns?
Yes, we take 5 every year. Brenda knows how to get in touch with me. We're taking applications right now. I'll give you a little bit of an insight into the education process of insurance. First of all, for all intents and purposes, we are invisible. The name says what it's supposed to say. Commercial Insurance Associates. Every one of you in here who drives a car, owns a car, buys automobile insurance, okay? Every one of you in here who has an apartment or has a home has homeowners insurance or rental insurance. And it goes on and on for boats and all kinds of other toys that you have. So the reason that I got into this business, in looking at all the opportunities I had at the time, was it's something that everybody has to buy. And so a number of schools in our area, Middle Tennessee State is an example, that's a competitor, University of Georgia, University of Mississippi, I could go on, offer actual programs in insurance and risk management. And what's interesting about this business, I may be a business owner, but I still principally think of myself as a salesman. I know Scott and Will feel the same way. I have a saying that if I don't sell something, I don't eat, and as you can see, I haven't missed many meals. So, but the one thing I would tell you is that what I do, I'm a salesman, we call it producer, so that we can thumb our noses a little bit at people and don't call ourselves salesmen. But there's so many different things in our business that you can get into. And as horrible as it may sound, at 75 years old, I look like a lot of people who own independent agents around the country. Everybody is getting old. There is a desperate, desperate need to bring young people in. I'll tell you 2 quick stories of things that actually happened. So my son Will and I are members of a country club in Nashville, about 1.5 miles from our office, called Richland Country Club, Old Country Club. We go and eat lunch there. So there was a young black man who was a server at our country club. His name is Tyran. He's got cool hair, very cool hair. He came to us one day and said, "What is it that you guys do?" He says, "Of all the people that come in here, you are the nicest people. What is it you do?" And I said, "We said, we're in the insurance business." "Well, what is that?" So I just started talking to him. He's got a college degree. He's from Georgia. And I said to him, over the years, I've found that there's a correlation between people who can wait tables to serve and people who can be in the insurance business on the service side. I said, "Why don't you come over and take our test and we'll see." So Tyrian's got like 2 kids. He's a doting father. And obviously he's been with us for now about 5 years. And I think the thing that I'm proudest when he talks to me about it is, when he was working at our club, he didn't get to see his kids' events. We have everybody in our place has a license, an insurance license. It's like a law license, except a lot easier to get, to say. And so our director of human resources said to us a few years ago, everybody here is a professional. We were spending all this time trying to regulate personal time off, PTO. And it was a mess, just trying to keep up with it. So Gary Bynum, is his name, says, everybody's a professional. Why try and regulate this stuff? All we care about is the job gets done. So we went to something called full-time off, FTO. Nobody has a vacation. Nobody needs to check with anybody if they want to take off to see their daughter's ballet recital. All we worry about is, does the job get done? Now, if you think about it, in a fairly regulated world, being able to say to your employees, we trust you, get the job done, but take care of your family first. We mean it. It's a gift that we can give to people, that we have given to people, that I don't think can be replaced. And I'm really, really proud of it. It works great for us. Don't think that it works necessarily everywhere, but it works for us. Next story. Sometimes on Saturday, I go to a restaurant called Sportsman's Grill. It's out off Harding Road. I've been going there forever. Anyway, I sit at the bar. I take the dry cleaning and I get a tank of gas and I sit at the bar. It's Sportsman's Grill. Have a hamburger. A woman there by the name of Sherry, a nice woman. Talk to her. She's a bartender. You know, we get to talking. She's got a daughter who just graduated from the University of Tennessee, and she's working at the same place at different times with her mother as a server. And I said, well, look, again, I've had this correlation between servers and the insurance business. She's certainly being underemployed with, with a college degree. Why don't you send her over and let us test her? She's now been with us almost 3 years. So there's two stories about something that you wouldn't think works, but boy, does it work. And boy, have we helped these people's lives. And boy, does that make me happy. In fact, I will tell you, nothing will ever make you happier than helping other people. And I mean that most sincerely.
Who has another question?
Please,
I've got one I'm dying to ask.
ask.
Okay, so typically when we have business people come and present here, they don't indicate any affinity for the humanities, and you obviously do. Could you speak to the role that the humanities have played in your life?
I'm happy to, because you've just hit upon my one single great passion in life, so thank you very much. It's really very simple for me. I went to a private boys' school in high school, Battleground Academy. I left Pulaski as a boarding student. There were in those days, there were maybe 7 or 8 kids from Pulaski that went to Battleground Academies in Franklin. And some of us would come home on the weekend and we'd golf, drive back to school on Sunday evening and go back into the dorm. Battleground Academy in those days really was a very limited school in ways that most people would find a little bit disinteresting in these days. I won't go much farther than that. So every year you had a math class. Every year you had some sort of social studies class. Every year you had a hard science class. And the first year was physical science, which was a little bit of chemistry and physics together. Second year biology, third year physics, fourth year chemistry. When I went to the University of Tennessee in the fall of 1967, I was enrolled in freshman chemistry 1110. Who knows if that's the right number? It's a long time ago. They were using the same book that I used, and I'd already done everything. I'd already done it. I took a language every year. My language was Latin. I took 4 years of Latin. When I graduated from Battleground, I both read and spoke Latin. I exempted 3 or 4 years of Latin at the University of Tennessee. That's a little bit of history. Now, what is important about this? By the way, with all due respect, I've never had a formal business course. It's kind of hard to believe. I would put my financial skills and my accounting skills up against anybody. Totally self-taught. Remember, necessity is the mother of invention. And I would suggest I was able to acquire those skills because I was taught how to think. I think the liberal arts, this is the way that I describe it, teaches one to observe. And from observing, to deduce. There's this corona, if you will, of knowledge about math, about language, about history, about social studies that you acquire by being involved in this. It gives you the framework to measure the world around you. It's been my great passion. That's what Jackie and I created at the University of Tennessee, Knoxville. The Humanities Center is really the nerve center of the whole College of Arts and Sciences in Knoxville. I know we're here because of Dean over there, and it's a business thing. And I'm not deploring formal business education. If it's what floats your boat, by all means do it. But I'm telling you, don't forget the humanities, because she's teaching you skills. Basically, the arts and sciences give you the framework in which to apply those skills, in my view.
Who else has a question?
Gee, I'm anxious.
Yeah, Mr. Denbo, you've run several
Don.
successful.
Don, my
Don.
father's name was Mr.
You've run several successful businesses, and the students here are going to be in business and be members of teams, and you obviously attract people who want to work for you and keep them there. How do you keep them there? How do you attract them and keep morale up at your business?
There's a book called The Culture Code, which I'd recommend anybody read. I've read it several times. And it talks about how culture is created in a very formal way. When I read it, it's been around for about 6-7 years. I read it right after it came out. I was shocked to find out that we were doing most of the things that the author said. In most respects, it's the simplest thing that you can imagine. A lot of it has to do with just having respect for your employees. So all of this, as I said, came from a company called Willis, which is a New York Stock Exchange listed company, a behemoth with multiple billions of dollars of revenue. And when we started Commercial Insurance Associates, not to do the things that we wanted, but to avoid the things that we didn't like. And a lot of this is just basically, so much of our business has to do with selling. And people that tried to sales manage me at different points in my career, you could probably figure out unsuccessfully. And basically my view about that is we don't sales manage at all. We sales lead. As the old saying goes, it's easier to pull a piece of string than it is to push a piece of string. And so Scott and Will and I and the other partners in our firm, I hope, set a really good example of how you make a living in this business. A lot of it is some commitment, perseverance. Probably the most difficult thing in the part of business that I exist, for the most part, is being able to be told no over and over again. But you got it. That's the nature of the beast. But you got to pay people with the market. You got to let them know that you appreciate them. And you got to treat them like human beings every day. I think if you do those things, you'll foster a culture, and it will be rewarding for them and for you. Thank you all so much. It's been a pleasure and an honor.
Thank you so much for you all being here, but I think you can see why I was so excited about having Don come to Pulaski and talk to us and give us all his, I mean, was that not amazing, all the things he's done? So, anyway, we're done. If anybody doesn't have any more questions,
We need a picture of y'all before anybody leaves the stage, so, yeah.
Okay.
Everybody else can be dismissed, we'll get you some pictures.
Thank y'all so much for coming. Now, how are we gonna beat this the next time?
I got a pair of sunglasses for you.